requesting, "Someone who has seen a ghost, literally. I don't believe a single one of you." Okay, here's mine. Feel free to debunk. I'm a skeptic, so I'd welcome an explanation. My mother, sister, and I lived in a very old house for a couple of years. There were 3 situations that passed the line of easily explained for me. First, I arrived home from school one day and was alone. I went into the bathroom, and while I was on the toilet, the bathroom door, which I had left slightly ajar, because I'm a real class act, slammed shut. This could have been an air pressure thing. The place was drafty as hell. What I can't explain is how the door locked itself. It had one of those old deadbolt-style locks that required one of those long-stemmed antique keys to lock and unlock. I don't know if it was easy to operate, because we did not have a key, and never had. I'd slammed that door countless times, and it had never locked. After several hours in the bathroom, a neighbor came over to attempt picking the lock. When this failed, he tried to break it in. He kicked the door once, and was getting ready to hit it again when there was an audible click, and it just swung open. Number 2. Should have made this one the toilet story. My mother, sister, a babysitter, the owners of the house, and myself all saw a figure we interpreted to be a taller-than-average woman in a full-length dress with long, straight blonde hair. Mom saw it first in her bedroom once, and in the living room in broad daylight another time. She said nothing to anyone, because the rent was cheap, we were broke, and she didn't want a couple paranoid kids asking to move out. The babysitter, who was a family friend, reported seeing a woman sitting on the porch swing through the living room window, but found nobody there when she walked out the front door. She saw someone similar in the yard on another occasion, but we had neighbors, so I have to wonder about that one. When I saw it, I had been asleep, and woke to find someone standing over my bed. No creepiness, no dread, or anything, just a lady standing there. There was a definite chill in the air. She turned and left. My mom had a friend who was roughly similar in stature and appearance, so I assumed it was her. I got up and went into the hallway, and there was no one there. When I woke my mom, she said Sue was not staying with us that night. I didn't think of it as a ghost at the time, just something weird. It was 5 a.m. when this happened, so I just stayed up after that. This makes me doubt it was a dream. It wasn't until a year after we'd moved out that Mom raised the possibility of there having been a ghost. She mentioned having seen a something, and I described what I saw. Her description matched mine. After that, we asked other people who had stayed with us, and got the account from the babysitter. Her description matched ours, without prompting from Mom. We were renting the place from the owners, who were friends of my parents, and they also admitted to thinking the place was haunted when we asked them a couple years later. They didn't bring it up at the time, because they thought they were nuts for thinking so. Same tall blonde woman. My sister claims to have seen something, but she was in kindergarten at the time, and I have to wonder if she was dreaming. Her description matches ours, but she related it some time after hearing our tales, so that could have colored the memory. Third, the place was just generally weird. There was a certain dread about the house that I honestly can't explain away with bad architecture and low-budget decor. People did not like being in the house for very long. It was always cold, 365 days a year. The air was rarely on during the summer, but in the winter we would crank the furnace and still have to start a fire in the living room to keep warm. The place was big, drafty, and old, but it had a new furnace, and it should have made some kind of difference. Nobody would go into the basement for any reason. I don't think I ever got more than halfway down the stairs, and even my dad found excuses to avoid going down there to check on the whole woefully inadequate furnace situation. Mom had the washer and dryer set up in the kitchen to avoid going down there. My friends would agree to stay the night, and ask to go home before bedtime. I should stress, this was absolutely not a spooky-looking house. It was bright red on the outside, well lit inside, cheerful-looking, and not at all a house you would think looked haunted. For what it's worth, whenever I've driven by since, up to this day, I've never seen the place without a for sale sign out front. I had a ghost experience in my last house. I was 13, and my bedroom was on the bottom floor of my raised ranch house. The rest of my family had bedrooms upstairs. The very first night I slept down here, it was extremely eerie, and I always had the feeling that something or someone was watching me. I'd had weird things happen every now and then, like hearing footsteps, random knocks, things moved, etc. Maybe 2 months later, I go to sleep one night and turn the light off and shut the lights off and shut my door and go to sleep. I woke up at 2 a.m. with every single hair on my body standing up, and I immediately noticed the light outside my door is on and my bedroom door is open. I turn over slowly, and I start to hear footsteps, which sound like they're in front of my room walking down the hall. So I'm terrified, staring at my open doorway with the light on, hearing these footsteps, and I hear 2 jiggles on the locked door down the hall. Not a doubt in my mind what the sound was. I use that door every day. And that door leads to the garage, which was closed, so it was jiggled from the inside. To this day, I have never felt as absolutely fucking petrified I was when I heard this. I literally couldn't move. Then I heard the footsteps again, maybe 5 or 6 of them walk over from the door back to in front of my room. I just could feel a presence there. I was aware of what was happening. I did what any 13-year-old did. I turned over slowly toward the wall and closed my eyes hard as I could and forced myself to sleep. I eventually moved out of that house, but goddamn never experienced anything like that before or since. 5 years later, I come to find out that the grandfather of the family, who lived in my old house before us, died in the downstairs bedroom that I was living in. I had experiences when I was 7 or 8 with what I'd like to call a ghost, but since I have no hard evidence besides what I have seen and what others who lived in the house have experienced, I will just call them strange events. These people include my mother, the landlady, and previous residents. Biggest event: my second-floor bedroom was rectangular in shape. At the top corner of the long side was the door linked to my mother's room. At the bottom corner of the opposite long side was the door/mini hall to my playroom. I decided to go into my playroom after school one day and stopped in the doorway between my mother's room and mine. In the doorway to the playroom there was a black mass in the shape of a woman in a dress, much like a shadow, but opaque. The light from the playroom, now in full force because of the direction of the window and the time of day, was spilling around her. This is going to sound crazy, but even though this shadow woman was a black mass, I got this feeling of purple. Either she was wearing purple, or the whole thing was setting off my synesthesia. I froze in total fear because I knew it was only my mother and I in the house, and if this was real, then there was a break-in. I bolted down the stairs to tell my mom, who went immediately upstairs and made rounds of the place. There was no one there and no sign of a break-in, windows closed and locked. The second floor would have been unreachable except by shimmying up a tree or climbing the porch roof, and this would have been in full daylight on a busy street with kids and parents in the neighborhood being out. Over a year, silly little things kept happening. Things would go missing, which happens easily when you have 8 years old and a full-time working mom in the house. We would search the house up and down for a week, and then inevitably would find those things in the most obvious places, on the kitchen counter or dining room table, or on the floor in the living room. We never attributed those things to anything but our own absent-mindedness. In the backyard, my mom would plant flowers each fall. Each spring they would always come up white: tulips, roses, daisies, lilies, and various other things. It didn't matter where she got the bulbs from or in what packets, multicolored or a single color. It could have been animals digging up the bulbs and leaving the previous year's bulbs alone, since a certain previous resident, who will be clear just below, liked white flowers. The landlady came about a year after the shadow incident to check in on the house. She and my mom were talking for a bit when she asked if my mom had met Mrs. Kaufman yet. Thinking it was a neighbor, my mom commented that we had met everyone in the neighborhood and knew no Mrs. Kaufman. The landlady laughed and said Mrs. Kaufman was a ghost in our house who wore purple and took things. Mrs. Kaufman's father had built the house back in the late 1800s. Mrs. Kaufman was born, raised, and died there. My mom, thinking I was just being a spooky kind of kid, had told no one of my sighting in the playroom doorway or the things that kept going missing and reappearing. They talked for a bit more, and the landlady, who had bought the house after Mrs. Kaufman died and lived there for a few years before putting it up for rent, said Mrs. Kaufman's garden had been full of white flowers when she moved in, and later residents had remarked that the bulbs kept coming up white every year. She also told my mom that in order to get things back that went missing, all she had to do was ask nicely, and we'd get them back faster than just a week. Getting back my crayon. A few weeks after the landlady and my mum had talked, my red crayon went missing. It was out of my box of 72, and we searched around the house before I went to school. I had used it the night before to do a school assignment and needed to take it with me. When we couldn't find it, she sent me on the bus to school and searched the house herself. She could very well have overlooked it, but she told me she asked Mrs. Kaufman to give the crayon back because I really needed it. She then went into the dining room a bit later, and it was sitting in the middle of the dining room table. From then on, we would ask Mrs. Kaufman to return things that went missing, and they would appear in obvious places over the course of a day. These could all be coincidences that just lined up perfectly. It was a strange house, but I loved it, and eventually the whole Mrs. Kaufman thing became a running joke with me and my mom. Since nothing could be backed up with hard evidence, and I have yet to see another ghost or have anything strange happen to me, I just like to say it was an odd time in my life where odd things happened that I can't explain. My friend and I are swim instructors for our local town. The pond was closed due to contamination, so our boss man agreed to ship us over to the old school youth center to clean the hell out of it. The place had not been adequately cleaned in 15+ years, so my friend and I, we'll call her Your Highness, loaded up with hardcore chemical cleaners and set to work sweating our tits off in 90-degree heat while rigorously scrubbing every inch, every corner. A week went by and nothing happened. About 2 days into the second week, I was in the basement area where the bathrooms, pool tables, foosball tables, etc. are located. Now, the place has 3 staircases. 2 are located in the middle of the building, the third on the right-hand side. At the time, Your Highness was cleaning the side stairwell, a good 25 feet away from where I was standing. I could hear her laboring away. As I was sweeping about, I hear the bathroom door slam shut. The bathroom door is situated adjacent to the side stairwell. When I ask her why she is slamming doors, she asks me what I am talking about it. Your Highness did not hear it. Day 3 this time, Your Highness and I are upstairs working in the b-ball court. We are cleaning the sideboards when we hear the pool tables being used downstairs, multiple breaks, balls rolling around. Your Highness, and I think that some little turds are fucking our cleanliness up, have broken in through the downstairs, so we hightail it down there. Me down the center stairwell, Your Highness down the side stairwell, so as to catch him. Well, we reach each other before we reach any rascals. There was no other way out of the building, and the doors were locked from the inside. Day 4, Your Highness and I are working in the main office of the youth center. The music machine is merrily playing in the b-ball court, which we could not see from the office. Abruptly, the music turns off. Your Highness goes to investigate. The machine has been unplugged. At this point, we start to joke about how the chemicals, bleach, heavy-duty cleaners, are starting to have an impact on our sanity. But the music had just stopped. The machine had been plugged in previously. There was no one else in the building. We begin to become more wary of this place. Day 5, all day long we hear children's voices in the basement, mostly laughing, but some inaudible whispers are heard from the tops of the stairs. We both try not to freak the other one out and pretend that we do not hear anything until finally there is such a high-pitched cackle that we both run from opposite areas of the building for safety. We sit, and we listen, and we leave work early. Day 6, final chore at the youth center. Thoroughly mop the floors. Your Highness and I are thrilled that we are getting out of this place. At this point, we are a little skittish. Every dropped broom scares the hell out of us. Up until this point, the energy in the place has been fairly chipper. No discernible negativity whatsoever. Around 3 p.m. on day 6, the air changes. It is palpable. It's like an increased pressure on the chest. Your Highness and I decide we need to clean the floor and get out for some Itais immediate. We scrub, and Your Highness begins to mop. The place is spotless. We go back into the b-ball court to turn off the fans, do a final look over in the basement together, and head back upstairs. The wet floor is now covered in footprints. Dirty footprints. Barefoot, slippered, you name it. I don't believe in ghosts. I have never seen a ghost. But I was never more scared than I was those 6 days in that building. Looked into it. Could find no fire or tragedies that had occurred. However, in this area of our town there were a plethora of native burial grounds, so